Yesterday, I passed back your introductions that you had written, and I gave you some feedback on how you can improve them. And we did some revision. Some people had to revise their main ideas because when we used the strategy for testing the main ideas, you realized that they were not supportive of your thesis or that they overlapped. And a lot of you made some tweaks and revised your plan, and you also revised your introduction to make it better. And that's what we're trying to do. Every day, we're trying to make our writing better than it was yesterday. We're trying to improve it. So I'm trying to find ways in which I can give you feedback pretty quickly on the work that you're doing. Today, we're going to shift from introductions and we're going to shift into body paragraphs. Now, this is the second essay that we write. It is the second time that we talk about body paragraphs. And you already got feedback from me regarding your first essay on Chutz Creek Elementary using that checklist, remember? And a lot of you set goals for yourself as to how you were going to improve this essay. So you'll want to keep those in mind as we begin to work on body paragraphs. Now, today's lesson is not so much a mini lesson as it is a guided practice. And every time we go through a cycle of writing an essay, we're going to talk about another element to the body paragraph that we're going to add to our toolbox of writing tools to use to write an effective essay, because that's what we want to do. We know that we're going to have to write essays for as long as we are in education, as long as we are learning, and sometimes maybe even essays for a job. So this is a skill that is going to be useful to you. We want to get it right now, all right? We want to get as much of it as we can now. All right, so hopefully you have your plan, and you can see this is my plan for my essay about my special person, my grandmother. We already walked through this earlier, right? Last week, we walked through the plan. We walked through making the plan, making sure that we had full, complete sentences for our thesis and for each of our main ideas. Remember how helpful that was in writing our introduction. Now we're going to move on to our body paragraph. So open your journal to the next blank page, and please put the date up at the top right-hand corner. Can you stop doing that, please? It's making a lot of noise. We always date our work so that we know when we created it. We can watch over time in our journal how we got better at doing something by paying attention to the dates. Okay, we know from looking and using our checklist that our body paragraph has several different layers in it. We know that we have to first indent, because that's a visual indication to our reader that we are starting a new paragraph. We are shifting from one idea to another. Then we are going to choose a transitional phrase to add to one of our main idea sentences. After that, we're going to present our bullets, our details. Remember, our bullets or details are the things that we put underneath our main idea sentence. And you can see these are the bullets that are here. Those are reminders to me about what I want to write about to support this idea, this main idea. So for my main idea, my grandmother made the time to do special things with each of her grandchildren. I want to talk about going Christmas shopping with her. I want to talk about traveling to Nova Scotia with her. I want to talk about how she taught me how to bake. So if you have put the time and the effort into your plan, then you're going to be ready to write. Remember, a lot of times writers want to skip the plan, but if you put the energy into your plan, it actually makes the essay easier to write. Okay, so I'm going to begin I'm going to first use my chart, my transitional phrases chart, and you'll notice on the first row here, we have transitional phrases for beginning our body paragraphs. And we have several to choose from, all right? Now, there are certainly more transitional phrases and different transitional phrases that you could use. This is a beginning. This is a place to begin. As you become an advanced writer, you might decide to add some to this. You can also add some by writing them right in on your chart. But for now, we're just learning, so we're going to stick with these. Okay, so I know that I want to start, first of all, indenting. And remember, indenting, you can use your finger to indent, leave that white space. And I want to use the transitional phrase first. And I'm going to put a comma. So right now on your sheet, I want you to choose the transitional phrase that you want to use from the chart, and I'd like you to do the same thing I just did. Indent and write that transitional phrase. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look back on my plan. I'm going to look at my sentence that I wrote here from my main idea, and I'm going to add it. Now, on my plan, the M is capitalized because this is a sentence. But when I'm writing, it's no longer the first word in a sentence. It's no longer the first word in this sentence. So I'm going to make the M in my lowercase. And I'm just going to copy my sentence right from my planning sheet. Go ahead and do that for me. And notice when I come down to the second line, I go all the way over and line it up with the red line. Remember, you're using your planning sheet. You're writing about your special person. And guys, if you find yourself getting behind, that means you're going to have to do it at home to catch up. Every day we move forward. Stop when you get to the end of that first sentence. So what we've done so far is we've given our reader a visual cue, which is this indent, this white space here. Then we've also given a word clue to indicate this is our first main idea that we're going to talk about. First, comma, my grandmother made the time to do special things with each of her grandchildren. That is my main idea sentence. If you look on your checklist, You can see where it says transitional phrase plus main idea, first main idea. And remember, we copied it right from our plan because we made a good plan. Now, let me just take a moment to talk about transitional phrases with you. Transitional phrases are important for shifting from example to example and from main idea to main idea and from main ideas to conclusions. And normally, they are separated from the sentence with a comma. However, some transitional phrases do not do that, do not work that way. And so a way that you can test it is if you can read the sentence omitting the transitional phrase and the sentence makes sense, then a comma belongs there. So I can say, my grandmother made the time to do special things with each of her grandchildren. That can stand alone without the transition. So the transitional phrase does get a comma. Is there a reason why you're sighing so loudly? Okay, so now I'm ready to start introducing my bullets. Now I'm ready to start introducing my details. Notice Christmas shopping, Nova Scotia, taught me to bake. Those are just little words and phrases on my planning sheet to tell me what it is that I want to talk about. Okay. Take a look at your transitional phrase chart. And you'll notice right underneath the transitions for the body paragraphs, we have transitional phrases to introduce our evidence or our details. So every time I get ready to shift and introduce a new detail, a new bullet, I'm going to choose one of these transitional phrases because I want my reader to know this is a new idea. This is a new detail. Yesterday in Reader's Workshop, we learned that when we read, we figure out what is the author trying to teach us here, and then what details is the author giving us to give us this main idea, to support this main idea. You're just going to be doing that very same work, except as the author now. You have the main idea, and you are going to create the details to support it. All right, so for my first main idea is the Christmas shopping detail on my plan. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose, for example. Now, if I was doing a mini story or if I was remembering something that happened in the past, I might say, one time, last Saturday, last summer, during spring break, all of those are transitions. But I'm giving a detail. For example. And then I'm going to write about my detail. Go ahead and choose a transition and write about your first detail. Now, remember that we talked about our checklist, and when we noticed our structure for our essay, we know that we need to elaborate. All right? The checklist says elaborating. Well, what is elaborating? Elaborating is saying more. I'm not just going to say, for example, she took us, each one of us, to the mall to go Christmas shopping for a day of shopping, and then I'm not going to say another example is she took me to Nova Scotia, and a third example is she taught me how to bake. Because you don't know, as the reader, or your reader doesn't know what that looks like. Going to the mall for a day of shopping when I was a teenager looks very different from you going to the mall for a day of shopping. So I need to say more. That's what elaborate means. Say more. I need to say more about this detail so that you can see it. And you need to write more about your detail so your reader can see what your detail is. Now, keep in mind, this is pretty complicated. I'm trying to support my main idea of spending time. Spending a special time in my pieces of nurturing. So I need to bring that out when I say more. So in the next sentence, I don't want you to introduce your next detail. In your next sentence, what you need to do is you need to say more about this detail. And what you say more about it is that you're describing what it looks like, describing how it made you feel. Now, here's something to help you do that, because that's a difficult process. And these are more like think prompts. All right? You don't necessarily have to write this shows in your essay, but you can think this shows and then write about what it shows. Okay? So, what does this illustrate? What does this show? What does this prove? What does this reveal? What does it mean? Okay? So I'm going to then go ahead and I'm going to write to say more about going shopping. And you go ahead and say more about your first detail. So my first detail, as I'm introducing it, I say, for example, every Christmas she took each of us, one at a time, to the mall for a day of shopping. We picked out a new outfit and went out to lunch. This was a special treat because I come from a large family and we rarely ate at a restaurant. So remember, when you elaborate on your detail, when you elaborate on your bullet from your plan, you're saying more. You're explaining why it's important, why it's significant. You're describing what it looks like. You're helping your reader see your point, see your main idea. If I just stopped after saying I went for a day of shopping at the mall, my reader would still be left with a vague idea. realized that that was pretty special. Okay, so after you have said more about that detail, you are ready to introduce your second detail. So we're going to go right back to our chart. We're going to look again at the row across that tells us how to introduce evidence, and we're going to choose a transition from here to give a second detail, a second bullet. And I'm going to use this one right here so I can demonstrate. That this transitional phrase, another example, does not get a comma in this situation. And I'll show you in a moment what I mean by that. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Okay, so here is my transitional phrase. And I'm pulling, this is the next detail I'm pulling off. Oops, can't see it. Nova Scotia. I said, another example is that she took us on a trip when we graduated from the 8th grade. Now, notice I do not have a comma here, because if I take that transition out and I try to read this sentence, is that she took us on a trip when we graduated from the 8th grade, that doesn't make sense. So if I take this out and I read it, it's not a standalone sentence. It doesn't stand by itself. So I do not put a comma there. Everybody understand that? Okay, so now I've introduced my second detail. With a transitional phrase that gives my reader a cue, telling my reader, okay, she's done talking about the first example. Now she's going to move on to the second example. And I've put a transitional phrase here. And I have listed the second detail. So what should I do now? What do I have to do now that I put the second detail? Who remembers? What do you do after you present your detail? Sean? Say more, right? We're going to elaborate on it, or we're going to say more. We're going to describe it, or tell how it made us feel, let our reader know why it's special. So we elaborate by saying more. So now I'm going to say more about this because you don't know very much about this trip. All you know is that when I graduated from the 8th grade, I went on a trip with my grandmother. But you don't know anything about it yet. So I'm going to give some more. I'm going to say more about it so that you have an idea. Go ahead and do the same thing. Introduce your second bullet. Use a transitional phrase. And then say more. you're noticing how much longer your paragraphs are becoming, how much meatier, how much clearer to your reader what your main idea is. Okay? This is hard work, guys. It's very, very hard work. You have to be very much aware that you need to do this and then be able to apply it to your writing kind of almost in an automatic way, like a habit. Since you have 3 bullets for each of your main ideas on your planning sheet, and you write at least 2 sentences for each, you can see how easy it is for you to complete the checkbox here that says 5 to 6 sentences to elaborate, explain each bullet, or tell an anecdote or mini story. Later this week, we'll be talking about mini stories and how you use a mini story to support your main idea. But today, we're just learning about elaboration. Okay, so now I'm ready because even though I have a nice long paragraph here, I'm not done. I still have one more bullet. So now I'm ready to give my reader another cue. So what do? How do I cue my reader to the fact that I'm going to introduce another example or another detail? What do? Nobody? Lorenzo? Absolutely. We're going to look for another transitional phrase from this box right here. Go ahead and I'm going to roll the die for you, Lorenzo. Number 15, help yourself to a prize. Okay, so I'm choosing another transitional phrase. And I'm writing about my third detail. And guys, while I'm thinking about it, because I kind of got crowded here at the end, some of you are, when you're writing, some of you break your words up because you run out of space. There are actually rules for hyphenating words and doing that. And since we haven't covered those rules yet, I'm going to ask you not to break up your words into pieces. If you don't have enough room to write your word on the line, jump down to the next line and keep the word whole. Don't break it up. Don't write the ER on the next line, okay? Keep grandmother all together. If you don't think it'll fit, go down to the next line, okay? I'm not sure if we'll have time this year. Hopefully we will, to cover the hyphenating rules. But you will get that as a standard, but I don't think it's actually a standard until the 6th grade. Okay, so now I've introduced my third bullet. I can't just rush to the end, okay? And I think this happens sometimes. You're looking at your paragraph and you're saying, oh my gosh, this is getting so long, I'm just going to end it right here. Remember, you put in the effort, it's going to show. All right? You put in the effort and the hard work, it's going to show. Your work will be better. So now I'm going to say more because you don't know what it looks like when my grandmother taught me how to bake. You don't know how that makes me feel. You don't know the effect that it's had on me. Okay? So I'm going to say more. So I want you to go ahead, introduce your third bullet, your third detail, and say more about it. If you run out of room on the front part of the page, then just go ahead and continue on to the back. Okay, now one of the things that I did notice in the very first round of essays that we did was that a lot of you kind of thought, well, I'm done. I did my 3 bullets. I did a good job. I have the right amount of sentences. Moving on to the next main idea. A lot of you forgot about that tricky little connecting sentence or linking sentence, okay? Stop and think for a second. You have been writing sentence after sentence after sentence about these details, right? You're getting to the end of the paragraph. You know what you're writing about, but your reader isn't with you anymore. Your reader's mind has wandered away. Your reader is thinking about the baking with the grandma, not thinking about spending time with the grandchildren. So your job, because this is part of the rubric, this is part of the standard, it's called coherence, sticking together. Sort of like when you make meatballs. You put eggs and breadcrumbs so that all the meat will stick together and it won't fall apart. Well, you don't want your essay to fall apart. You want these little sentences at the end to link it all together and give it coherence. So if you look at the checklist, it says that this last sentence needs to have a combination of words and phrases that come from both the main idea sentence and the thesis statement. Both are written on your plan. Both are written in your introduction. And at the beginning of this paragraph is your main idea sentence. So I need to think about, I've been talking about the fact that my grandmother made the time to do special things with each of her grandchildren, because I'm using that as one of my main ideas to support the idea that she was an expert on nurturing a family. Nurturing is taking care of, okay? Taking care of and loving. So I need to finish my paragraph with this linking sentence. So I'm going to, first of all, remind the reader of the main idea. So making time, and you're going to use your own, obviously, your own main idea. Making time to do special things. With each of her grandchildren. Is just one of the ways my grandmother nurtured her family. So if you notice that final sentence, when you write your final sentence, take a look at your main idea, take a look at your thesis. How do they go together? That last sentence in your paragraph is going to help to give that cohesion that you need, holding it together, holding your essay together so it doesn't fall apart. Now, before I move on to the next body paragraph, which actually we're going to do tomorrow, and I'm going to teach you how to do a mini story. But before I move on, I always want to go back and I want to proofread my work. Because if I need to fix anything, I want to fix it now. So, as a final step today, what I'd like you to do, and you can follow along with me and listen to how complete this sounds. Listen to how meaty it is, and clear, okay, and convincing. And it sounds like an expert. So everybody's eyes are up here, pencils are down. Pencils are down, eyes are up here on the screen. First, my grandmother made the time to do special things with each of her grandchildren. For example, every Christmas she took each of us, one at a time, to the mall for a day of shopping. We picked out a new outfit and we went out to lunch. This was a special treat because I come from a large family and we rarely ate at a restaurant. Another example is that she took us on a trip when we graduated from the 8th grade. The two of us drove to Portland, Maine, boarded a ferry, sailed across the Bay of Fundy, and docked in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. For 1 month, we visited family and got reacquainted with cousins. A final example is that my grandmother took the time to teach me how to bake. She taught me all kinds of baking tips that I still use today. Whenever someone compliments me on my baking, it always makes me think about my grandmother. And then here comes that linking sentence. Making time to do special things with each of her grandchildren is just one of the ways my grandmother nurtured her family. Okay? I know that it seems like a long process. I know that it seems like it takes a long time. But this is one of the processes that will get faster the more you practice it. Okay? And hopefully you can see how important it is to make sure that you have created a good, complete plan ahead of time, because it certainly makes the writing easier. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes to finish up your paragraph. If you finished it with your linking sentence, you can close your notebook and take out a book to read, and we'll have about 10 more minutes of work time, and then we'll move into Reader's Workshop.